All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I am Greer Aeschbury. I am the organizing strategist with the ACLU for Southwest Ohio. Go ahead and put yourself on mute if you're not. I just got a little bit of feedback, and it's gonna be a full session, so I'm sure we'll go back and forth with that a little bit. Like I said, I'm with the ACLU of Ohio. We were founded 100 years ago this year in 1920, and we started actually when a group of organizers were thrown in jail for protesting World War I. So we've got roots in protests all the way back to our beginning 100 years ago, and so I'm going to share with you some insights from our work.
Greer, you're muted.
Thank you. So I'm going to share with you some of the wisdom from our organization all the way back 100 years ago, and from lawyers who most recently were on the ground at the RNC protests and picked up a lot of tips from there. So I'm going to share my screen right now. All right, can everyone see my PowerPoint? I can't see any of you, so. Yes, I see a thumbs up. All right, cool. So you probably all heard of your First Amendment rights that protect your free speech. So this is in the Constitution that protects your right to protest. You have the freedom of speech, you have the right to peacefully assemble, that's getting together in your protests, and you have the right to petition grievances of the government, so to tell the government what you think they're doing wrong. It's important to note that preserving speech for all people means that the state cannot suppress voices it disfavors, particularly with the protests going on right now. People are protesting the state's actions, so we can be pretty confident that they disfavor the message, but they don't have the right to suppress it. And I should say too, as a disclaimer, I said this, I'm the organizing strategist. I'm not a lawyer, so none of this is legal advice. It's just some advice from me, the organizer. So can your speech be restricted? The content of your speech cannot be restricted legally. You can say whatever you want, but there are legal restrictions that can be put in place on the time, place, and manner. So there are allowed to be rules and regulations about what your protests look like. For example, the place of the protests. So public spaces are free for you to protest in as long as you're not blocking traffic or breaking the law. So that's a sidewalk, public park, anything that is a public space, you can protest freely anytime that you want. Some places do require permits or permission. So if it's a private space, then you need a permit. And then if it's also a protest that's going to significantly disrupt traffic, things like that, you'll get a permit for. So that's the type, I think of pride parades as that type of protest where they're going to shut down, you know, the main drag of the city for the whole day. They'll get a protest to do that. The protests that we're seeing right now are typically not having permits. And that may be intentional, but this is what the law says. So you can also pass out any type of literature during your protests. You have the right to hold signs. You can organize chants and say whatever you want. And you can engage people in public spaces. So if someone's not technically part of your protest, you're allowed to talk to them. It doesn't mean that they're somehow protected from what you're saying. And we're gonna immediately, when we start talking about rights, we get into this gray area and this tension between what your right is and what really happens out on the street and what you can do about it. So as we go through this, I'm gonna be telling you what is legally allowed and what's permitted. That doesn't mean that that's always what happens. That's why organizations like the ACLU exist. That's why these protests are on the street right now, because we know that the laws that are laid out in our Constitution even are not always respected. So saying that, you have all the rights to record law enforcement. You can record anything that's happening in a public space. But just because you have that right doesn't mean that the police will not grab your phone, smash it, tell you to delete what's on it. We have certainly seen them do that before. And then I also want to note, and this is something to think about as you're thinking about protesting, the photos and videos that you take could be used as evidence against people who engaged in the protest. So you post a picture on Facebook, look at all these beautiful people out to support Black lives, and there are identifiable faces in there. Those people that photo could be used against them. So be strategic about it. You can avoid faces in pictures. Just think about what you're posting and what the consequences of it could be. So when it actually comes to interacting with law enforcement, and these are tips, some of these are going to be more useful during protests, some of them not. I mean, if you're in a high pressure situation where there's noise and things happening super quickly, it's going to be more difficult to exercise your rights, right? But these are things that you can use at any time. So are there times when you have to speak to law enforcement? The only time you have to speak to law enforcement is to give your name, address, and date of birth to basically identify yourself to them. You don't have to show them an ID, but you can be arrested for refusing to identify yourself. And that is at any time, not just during a protest. But you don't have to tell them everything that they want to know. So one key phrase that can help you get out of interacting with law enforcement if you don't want to be is, am I being detained? This is in some ways a code phrase that the officer will have to answer either yes or no to. So legally, they can't detain you unless they have a reason to believe that you committed a crime. Again, that's legally. What actually happens in practice might be different from that. But you can ask, am I being detained? And if they say no, you're free to go and you should get out of there if you don't want to be arrested, right? And then obviously you are being detained when an officer uses enough force that you don't feel free to leave. So if you are handcuffed, if you're, thrown in the back of a paddy wagon, you're detained, and it's pretty obvious to you. One helpful thing that you can say, and again, this is not a magic bullet, but you can say, I do not consent to a search. So let's say a police officer wants to look through your backpack. You can say, I do not consent to a search. It doesn't mean that they'll automatically stop, but it demonstrates that you do know your rights. And so sometimes that will be enough to get them to back off. It can be evidence later if they really didn't have a legal reason to be searching your backpack and you consistently exerted your right to not consent to a search. That can be helpful. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, it doesn't prevent anything from happening to you necessarily. So the two, I think, most important phrases when you're protesting and there's a danger of being arrested are, I want to speak to a lawyer and I am going to remain silent. So tell them that you want to speak to a lawyer, and then after you say that, tell them that you are going to remain silent. And let me see if I can get, do I see the chat again? Okay. I'm gonna, so after you tell the police, I'm going to remain silent, anybody have any idea what you should do after that? Just chat it into the box. Remain silent, don't talk, remain silent. Yes, ding, 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 ding. So this is like the most common mistake that people make, and some people, like when they're nervous, start talking a lot. Don't do that. Do everything you can to remember to be quiet and not give the police any more information than they already have. Oops. There we go. So what to do if you're arrested, like I said, remain silent, ask to speak with a lawyer immediately. Those are your two key phrases. And it's important to tell the officer that you are exercising your right to remain silent, not just refuse to talk to them, right? And then you will have the right to make one phone call, maybe two, but you do have the right to one phone call, but the police can monitor those calls. So the only call they cannot monitor is to your lawyer. So just keep in mind as you're talking, telling people where you are, try to keep it to minimal information, whatever they need to know to get you out. This is a super important phone number. The National Lawyers Guild, if you don't know about them, you should find them on Facebook, look them up. They are an awesome support network of lawyers assisting people who have been arrested for protesting for Black lives. So they have this hotline set up. You can call if you get arrested. That can be your one phone call from jail, and they will put you into their database. They will send the word out to their network of lawyers, and they will do everything they can to get you out and make sure that you're safe. They can't guarantee that, you know, they're going to get you out immediately or anything, but it's going to help you not be lost in the system. And I can tell you, I work with some of these people. They're awesome, and they're going to work really hard to try to keep you safe. So you do have a network out there that you can rely on. And that, I would recommend writing that on your forearm in Sharpie, that number, the 614-654-6477. That is the #1 number to have with you in case of arrest. So some things to consider. Like I just said, write that number on your arm. You might also want to think about who else you would call. So if you do happen to get 2 phone calls from jail, do you want to call your mom, your friend? Don't have someone else who's also arrested listed on there. So make sure it's someone who's not participating in a protest. Also, make sure that you have someone who's not participating in a protest that knows that you are, and set a check-in time with them. So if they don't hear from you by a certain time, then they can call the NLG hotline themselves and let them know that you may be detained, and they can start looking and see if you are. Just some practical tips is to wear comfortable shoes, wear layers, and a face mask. So the face mask is obviously going to help protect from COVID-19, which, by the way, is already hurting Black and brown communities more than white communities. And so we do not want these protests to be a reason that that disease spreads even more in those communities. So it is something to definitely consider. But the face mask can also help protect you from pepper spray. And then you may want to bring an extra bandana to help with that as well. Bring an ID if you have one. Water and a snack is a good idea. If you have prescription medication, if you can bring it in its prescription bottle, that's a good idea. It's not going to guarantee that if you're arrested, you're going to be able to take it, but it makes it more likely because it indicates what it is and that it's actually yours. Bring a small amount of cash. And I have seen like a lot of lists floating around on social media that are big, long lists of things you should bring with you, that you're going to need a backpack to fit all that stuff. I would just be wary of bringing a backpack because you want to think about, you know, whether that's going to be easy to move around in, if it could cause you to trip or somebody to grab it. You want to kind of bring as little stuff as possible so it's easy for you to get in and out as you need to. So I think your best case scenario is you have like your water bottle on your belt loop, you've got a granola bar in your pocket, and you've got your ID, your cash, and your bandana in another pocket. So the other thing is just to look out for people who are trying to stir up trouble, and just be aware. Be aware of your surroundings, of where the police are, where you are, where the crowd is, and kind of where you are in relation to everybody. So it's just kind of being vigilant, and I'll talk in a little bit about how the situation can change and why that can be important. So in terms of your cell phone, first of all, make sure it's charged, but we recommend putting it in airplane mode because there is some technology that law enforcement can use to collect cell phone data from anyone in the area, including you. So if you put it on airplane mode, you're going to prevent that from happening. For the same reason, you don't want to connect to open or public Wi-Fi networks. So generally, right, the police have to obtain a warrant to search your phone, but these are not typical times. So to just prevent anyone from getting into your phone easily, get rid of like your Face ID or your fingerprint and make it so that you have to put in a code to get in. So again, if you're arrested, ask for your lawyer, remain silent, call the National Lawyers Guild or your lawyer if you happen to have one. Call your other contact. Document your injuries. So if you did get bruises, scrapes, whatever, any physical injuries, document those. Save that evidence, and then save any other evidence that you have, like a video of something that happened. We went down and helped the public defender's office collect information from people who were arrested in Cincinnati. And one of the things that they told us is that a lot of times people might record something that would be helpful, but it's on like an Instagram story and it disappears after 24 hours. So make sure you're actually saving anything that could be used in as evidence. And be prepared that you could stay in jail up to 48 hours. So if you're arrested on a Friday night, you probably have to wait until Monday to see a judge and get out. But if you're arrested on a Sunday night, you might be able to get out Monday morning and spend very little time in jail. So that's something to consider as well. Okay, so in terms of just kind of staying aware and understanding your surroundings and things that are changing in the protest. So law enforcement has these ranks which correspond with their decision-making power. So this chart has the chief at the top and that little star that indicates the chief, and then at the bottom is police officer, above that sergeant, et cetera, et cetera. So the higher the rank, the greater the ability to make decisions on the street. So if there is going to be a significant change in what the police are doing, there will probably be higher rank officials out there on the street. So if you start to see a bunch of higher ranked people, lieutenants, captains, commander, that may mean that they're about to make an order to change how the police are interacting with people. So that's something to be aware of if you are able to. And here on the next slide, you can see where you'll find that insignia. So it's on the left shoulder. You'll see his little arrows for the sergeant. It's either in cold weather, it's always visible no matter what they're wearing. All right, so what do the police have with them? So everyone knows that they carry guns, but they also carry taser. These are the everyday weapons. They carry tasers, handcuffs, baton. Those are the things that you will see all the time, including on your protest. And just as a point for the other slide and thinking about when you see a change in rank of officer. So when you see the cops on bicycles, those are usually the officers, the lowest level, or even on the horses. So a bunch of them lined up, that's pretty typical. So that's not something to like get too worried about, but if you see other folks with those higher ranks, that's when to be aware. Police have body cameras, which, at one point, people in the movement thought would prevent police brutality. I don't think too many people think that anymore. Important to note that they're usually on buffer mode, and a police officer has to switch them to event mode to record. So it's up to the police officer to start recording. So protest weapons, things that you might see, things we've definitely seen, I think in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. Pepper spray, OC spray, it's gonna sting your eyes and make, have a burning sensation. I have a question over here. I'm not a lawyer, but an organizer. How much of this presentation are dependable protections from the law and how much is experiential advice? We can never guarantee what's going to happen. And so my hope from this presentation is that you kind of get the tools, you understand the array of things that might happen, and then it's always going to be up to you to make the decision out on the street about, what you feel comfortable doing. I don't think none of us predicted, these protests were going to start happening. We didn't necessarily know how the police would respond. We can't guarantee they're going to respond one day to the other the same way. So it's just important to be aware of what could happen and ways to stay safe in those situations. So I hope that answered your question. So these are some other protest weapons. And these are rubber bullets and wooden bullets, which are classified as like non-lethal weapons, but they can be quite dangerous. I've heard of people having serious eye injuries from the wooden bullets, especially. So just know they can be dangerous, even though the police sometimes act like they're not. And then this is probably the, I don't want to say scariest, but definitely something to look out for. This is called the LRAD, and it is like a sonic device that sends sound waves out. And so the closer you are to it, the louder it will be. And if you're too close, it will actually hurt. And I have heard reports of people having hearing damage from them. So if you see on the slide, the graphic kind of shows if you're at 500 meters away, it sounds like a dog barking. And then if you're 50 meters away, it's like the front row of a rock concert. If you're 20 meters away, it's like a jet taking off. So it can get super duper loud. You can see the pictures of what it looks like. So that's something to keep your eye out for. It will be mounted on top of a vehicle, like a big van or a utility vehicle. And if you see it, be aware, oh, that's something that may be used. Maybe you want to try to get away from it. Maybe you decide it's time to leave, whatever. Just be aware that that's what that weird satellite looking thing is on the top of the van. I see somebody said Cincinnati had them on Sunday. So it's definitely seen them in Cincinnati. So that's what those things are. And then the Stingray, this is, we know that it's been used in Cleveland. Maybe you guys have heard it here in Cincinnati this time, but this is the thing that will get your cell phone data. So it kind of like tricks your cell phone into thinking that it's a cell tower, and it can track where you are and where everybody around you is. So that's why to put your phone in airplane mode. All right, so how to tell, I mean, we've talked a little bit about how to tell if things are changing, if things are escalating. These are some other signs that a mass arrest may be coming. So if police are dressed in riot gear, and I know they've been wearing riot gear a lot, so that may or may not be helpful. If you see a bunch of flexi cuffs around, so if you see that guy in the bottom right corner, that picture, he's holding those flexi cuffs. If you see a bunch of those around, that may mean that the police are planning to use those. If you see pop-up lines or kettling, so that's where the police basically like corrals the protesters into a certain area and sets it up so that you can't get out. So they may like direct you down into a dead-end alley or just like line the street so you can't leave the protest. So when I said be aware of where you are in relation to the police and the rest of the crowd, when you, the easiest way to leave a protest if you feel uncomfortable or feel like you want to get out of there is to be on the outsides of it, either on the side or front or back. The sides are probably the safest, but if this type of kettling things happen, you won't be able to leave. So this, I don't say this to like freak you out or anything, but just so that you can make a decision. And if you know there's some reason that you don't want to get arrested or you're not feeling well or anything, get yourself to the sides and get prepared to leave if you feel like things are going to escalate. So these are just tools to help you make a good decision and do what you want to do and not get in a situation that you're not prepared for or that you didn't want to be in. The other thing to look out for are large vehicles, public transport buses. I know those have been used in Cincinnati, unmarked vans. So if you see, you know, a bunch of metro buses parked a few blocks away, that's a good sign that they're gearing up for a mass arrest. On the good news, I did hear that the Metro Bus Union refused to help the police transport people. So there's also a lot of solidarity out there, which is awesome. So what happens if the police issue an order to disperse the protest? And this is one of those things that is legally supposed to happen. What actually happens may differ. So shutting down a protest should be a last resort for the police. Even if you're on the street, they are supposed to use other tactics to de-escalate. They are supposed to provide a reasonable opportunity to comply. So they should not just out of nowhere start pepper spraying people and arresting people. They are also supposed to give you clear and detailed notice of a dispersal order. So that means that there should be a megaphone saying, hey, we're about to arrest people. Hey, you have 10 minutes to leave. Another one, hey, you have 5 minutes to leave, right? And so this is what's supposed to happen. Whether it happens on the ground, I don't know if that is always the case. I have a question here. How common is it for news to travel fast if signs are visible? For example, vans being parked on a side street, is it common for it to spread quickly through the crowd? I don't know. I think that depends. Anybody else who has experience that wants to weigh in and answer that question? Definitely, I mean, if you can be communicating with your fellow people out there, that's the best. And if you're in a crowd of people, you know, that's the best case scenario, right? And then I think that's going to be easier for word to travel fast. Jared says for that Facebook Live has some info out. I mean, the unfortunate thing about communicating through social media and Facebook Live is then you're not able to prevent the police from using your cell phone data, but you're using that to communicate important information. I know Signal is an app that people use to communicate. So I don't know. I don't know if I have a clear-cut answer to your question, but just kind of depends. So I conclude this. Again, I hope you guys feel empowered knowing what your rights are. And I want you to know personally that by exercising your right to protest, you're protecting that right for everyone in America. And I am very grateful for that. And I appreciate all of you. And I'm really glad that you are here today. And I also want you to take away that you have this amazing network of support. I think like 600 people signed up for this training. There's an awesome group, Robin Wright and Pastor Pierce and some others that put this training together that are on the ground supporting people. The Cincinnati Public Defender's Office has been awesome. The National Lawyers Guild is out there. So you're certainly not alone. I know it can be maybe a little bit overwhelming to hear all of this, but there's lots of support and resources out there. I will drop my email into the chat right now. And then I'm going to ask Caitlin to share a couple of websites from the ACLU from Ohio and from our national office that have additional information about your rights as a protester. So you can click on those. And then I think, what time is it? Do I have time here? I can't see the time on my computer. I think we're going to have time to break out into breakout groups and put together a little protest plan. So based on all the information that you have heard, who are you going to call if you get arrested? What are you planning to bring with you? How are you going to stay safe? So we're going to break you out into groups of 2 for just a few minutes, and we'll bring you back at the end to answer any additional questions, and then you'll head into session 2. All right, I think that we have most of you back. So I hope that that was useful. Does anybody want to share what their plan is or a question that came up in their conversation? All right, not sure what happened. Having some fun Zoom technical difficulties, which I feel like is all of our lives now. So while we're waiting, you can chat in the box. If you did you guys put together a plan? Was that useful to put together a plan? Did any questions come up? Bring earplugs. Okay, that's a great great comment, especially with those sound devices. Bring earplugs. Any other tips that you guys have that you want to show out? Sharpie numbers on your arm. And think about if you're handcuffed or flexi cuffed, like if you can see where it's written on your arm. Question, is the NLG number local to Cincinnati? No, it's for the whole state. And it is, you know, real people who answer it. They've just got people staffing it 24/7. And so they were working on a way to make it so it could take multiple calls at once, but it's a real DIY operation, but they work super well. Best thing for the sound devices is to step to the side of them. They're more powerful than many ear safety devices on the market. So according to an audiologist friend, that's a great idea. So if you just step out of like the range of them, you'll get out of the way. Avoid wearing contact lenses. Yes, that is an awesome tip. If you get pepper sprayed, like if you've ever chopped peppers and then rubbed your eye, think of that, but way worse. Oh, all of the protest plan questions. Those were, who are you going to call? What numbers are you going to write on your arm? Who, now I can't remember what the other one was. That's the most important thing. Who are you going to call? Oh, what are you going to bring with you? And how are you going to stay safe? So Heather said oil-based sunscreen versus water-based sunscreen. That's awesome. Okay, a question from the group. How does wearing masks factor into being pepper sprayed? Did you mean like, how does it help you? It's just like a barrier, and it won't like prevent it from hitting you. Was that your question? Yeah, like cover your mouth, nose, face area. MK said it's good to bring another mask to change into. So if, you know, this one's kind of dirty, then you get another one. Jackie asked if wet masks can help against tear gas. I don't know. I've never done that. Does anybody have expertise in whether that helps? Feel free to chat it in there. So somebody said no, I think. They had to take their masks off after being tear gassed. Are there laws against covering your face in public spaces? Nope. Nope. You can wear your mask, or, you know, all of us are wearing masks all the time for COVID, but yeah, you can cover your face. Goggles. Good, good. Do you guys have a person in mind that you're going to tell where you are so they can check in if you're not back in time? Cool. If you have ski or snowboarding goggles, they're really protective. How can you tell the difference between tear gas and smoke gas before it hits you? Anybody have advice on that? I think it just happens so quickly that it's hard to, I mean, I think the things to be aware of are like, is the situation changing? Is something about to happen that's going to be different? But like, as far as the specifics, I think it tends to happen like really quickly. So it's hard to be sure what's happening to you in the moment. Make sure everyone has a pet sitter. Yeah, especially if you're going to be in jail overnight, who's going to take care of your pets or your kids? If we take over the street, are we breaking any laws just by marching? No. You have the right to be in any public place. Now, the police may say that it's a safety hazard or it's a significant disturbance, and so then they're going to tell you to leave. And this is where like the gray area comes in, and your rights versus reality. So the law says that you're allowed to be on the street, but if the police think it's a danger, then they can move you. So, you know, it's like, at what point do the police decide that something is a danger or a significant disturbance? And that's something, just as far as documenting evidence, if you felt like there was that your rights were violated, it's good to document as much of that as you can, but some of this is really hard. So like somebody was asking about documenting that the police did not give an order to disperse before, you know, pepper spraying or a mass arrest. And it's really hard to prove that they didn't do something, right? Unless you have a witness there that can say what happened the whole entire time, but like a video is not really going to prove that. So a lot of these rights can be really hard to prove whether or not they were violated. Heather says, don't bring weapons of any kind. You'll sit in jail longer and have a very high bail. Do you have to back up when a cop says to? So no, I mean, this is where what the law is, you know, the cop may say you're causing a disturbance or a significant safety threat, so we need you to move onto the sidewalk. And if you don't do it, then you may get arrested, right? I hate to say, like, do I have to do this if the cops tell me to do it? Well, no, but you may get arrested, right? And they may have a legal reason to do that. And again, it's really hard to prove what happened in these really tense, fast-moving moments. And recommends digital recorders. So I think we have just about 2 minutes left, and at 6:55, I think you guys will get transferred to session 2. Did someone mention umbrellas? Is that for pepper spray? Do you want to elaborate, MN? I don't think anybody mentioned that. But just know if we get cut off at 6:55, that's just because you're headed into session 2. Kaya heard that documenting it can be useful to have date, time, geographic stamps. Oh, if those are active in airplane mode, or if there's a way to turn them on while in airplane mode. That I don't know. That's a great question if anybody else knows in here. And Heather says to stay safe out there, and I definitely reiterate that. Again, I'm super grateful for all of your work and for being on the ground and being here, learning and sharing this information. You can reach out to us at the ACLU if you have questions. And again, I really appreciate all of the interaction here in the community. That's kind of what all of this is about. So I really appreciate that. Oh, oven mitts.